looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today we're going to be talking about a contract extension for Jauan Jennings. Did the 49ers overpay? An update on Brandon Aiyuk's contract situation with a couple of player comps that are worth discussing. The Niners getting some love from Pro Football Focus as its top-ranked roster, and CBS Sports naming San Francisco's running back group as tops in the league. To conclude the 49ers section, we're going to be talking about some very bad takes from some very bad 49er content creator morons. Before we transition to the plus section, I'm going to discuss a rewatch of the 2005 series on Sci-Fi, Battlestar Galactica. Fantastic series. A lot of thoughts there, and I had the unfortunate luck, well, it wasn't luck, since I decided to watch Madame Web over the weekend. Have thoughts there. It deserves all the negativity it's going to get, and I'll go into more detail. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So starting off with contract news, and Jauan Jennings signing a 2-year contract extension with the 49ers. Remember, he received the second round tender worth about $4.9 million, which Jennings had not signed. If anybody wanted to trade for Jauan Jennings, they would have to give up a second round draft pick for him, and that was never, ever going to happen due to Jennings' production or lack thereof. But he is a valuable piece to San Francisco, and I was wondering, when an extension happens, would it be something modest? Would it be something that could potentially lower that $4.9 million cap hit in year one? And while the numbers aren't officially out yet, here's what we do know. It's a 2-year extension worth up to $15.4 million. $10.5 million is guaranteed. So without knowing the base salaries or anything else in the nitty-gritty of the contract, he still has a $4.9 million cap hit in 2025, which means at least $5.6 million guaranteed hit next year in 2025. San Francisco was already $38 million over the 2025 cap, and that includes players that have void years and void money, including Isaac Yiadom, Dre Greenlaw, and Charvarius Ward, the biggest financial offender, over $12 million in a dead cap hit, and he is not signed to play with them in 2025. It would actually be cheaper for them to re-sign Charvarius Ward than to let him walk in free agency. We'll see what happens at the end of the season. Now, this 2-year up to $15.4 million contract only makes sense to me if there's a void year or two to spread out some of the cap hit or guaranteed money that Jauan Jennings is going to get. You know, maybe he doesn't see all $15.4 million. And again, we don't know if there's per game roster bonuses for him being active versus injured. Are there any playing time or statistical incentives for him that would allow him to make another $4.9 million on top of what's guaranteed? But there's obviously going to be base salary involved there. So he very well may see about, $12.5 to $14 million of the up to 15.4. But, first blush, and I think a lot of people are wondering this as well, is this high for a wide receiver 3? And before we answer that question, let's answer the next question is, does this mean Aiyuk or Debo is going to get traded? No. Jauan Jennings is not a starting outside receiver in this league. He is a big slot receiver. His contract of 2 years, $15.4 million shows that he is not a starting receiver. It shows that he is not even a temporary 1-year replacement, let's say, for Aiyuk or Debo, if by some weird chance they get traded before the season starts, because he is not a starting caliber receiver. And it would be an error to think that someone like Ricky Pearsall, as a rookie, could come in and emulate or capture 70 to 80% of the production that Debo or Aiyuk could. Now, for Jennings' career, 3 years, this is going to be his 5th year in the league. The first year he was on the practice squad when he was drafted, I believe, a 6th or 7th round pick out of Tennessee. For his career in total, 78 receptions for 963 yards and 7 touchdowns. That averages out to be 26 receptions, 321 yards, and basically 2.3 touchdowns per year. And his best season was 2022, 2 years ago, where he had 35 receptions and 416 yards, no touchdowns. So you're giving at least $5 million a year guaranteed to someone who last year had under 25 receptions, averaging 26 receptions in his career. Had, 10 receptions during the playoffs, 3 playoff games, so another, 3 receptions a game. He is not a 3 reception a game player. He's a number 3 receiver. If he was, he'd be averaging 50, 51 receptions per regular season. That's not what he does. He averages half that. He is represented, was it by Drew Rosenhaus? So he was going to get every last penny that he thought, and once that Boris thought he deserved, or Rosenhaus thought he deserved. And if the Niners slapped a $4.9 million second round tender on him for this year, that was the floor. If that's what you're thinking he's worth for this year, then you got to pay him a little bit more next year, if for no other reason than inflation. So this deal, unless there are void years, did not do San Francisco any favors in terms of the cap next year. They were about $6.5 million under the cap before this deal. They have another $18 million coming off in a day or two when Eric Armstead's contract comes off the books. But I like Jauan Jennings a lot. I love the attitude. I love the energy, the fire that he plays with. He is a very good blocker. Some may want to say elite. That's fine. I won't really argue too much with that. He'll block to the whistle. He'll block through the sidelines or to the sidelines. In terms of route running, okay, not fast, doesn't have great hands. Had a really good game in the Super Bowl where he threw a touchdown and caught one. Again, anybody can have a good game at any point in time, Super Bowl, playoffs, or not. I'm happy for him. For a 7th round pick that started on the practice squad that gets, even after taxes, and California is an expensive place to live, life-changing money for him and his family. Guys, it doesn't have to be $30 million a year to change somebody's life. I mean, $500,000, could change a lot of people's lives. $1 million, let alone what he's made so far, plus at least $10 million guaranteed, and that would probably be about $6 million after taxes. And hopefully he makes, even more, that up to $15.4 million route. But is he worth it? Are we going to say, yeah, look at the Super Bowl, look at how he blocks? All right, everybody take the fan hat off, take the illogical fan hat off, and just think about, is that worth it for a team that is cap strapped this year, even though we got $18 million, or they have $18 million coming from Armstead, but is certainly cap strapped next year, with Aiyuk's extension looming and Purdy's and whatever cuts or players that they cannot re-sign that are free agents. You look at who's out there. Now let's just talk about some players that are out there that San Francisco maybe could have signed and let Jauan Jennings walk. Still unsigned, to the best of my knowledge, Juju Smith-Schuster. Free agent, was with the Chiefs 2 years ago, had a pretty decent season. Patriots last year did not have a good season, but nobody on that offense did. For his career, averaging 61 receptions for 721 yards and 4 touchdowns. And some of that obviously is buoyed by the fact that he had a couple of really good seasons in Pittsburgh earlier in his career. But, built in the same kind of size, 6'2", 6'3", has had better seasons than Jauan Jennings has had. He would have fit in, I think, pretty well as a number 3. Then you get into a smaller receiver. Now we're talking about around the same kind of money. If we're going to assume that Jauan Jennings is going to get all of that $15.4 million, that means he's going to get $7.7 million a year. Someone like Curtis Samuel is getting $8 million. He's averaging $8 million a year. His average throughout his career, 45 receptions for 483 yards and 3 touchdowns. So we're still going 19 receptions higher on average and about 160 yards per season on average more than Jauan Jennings. Someone like Darius Slayton, I live in the Northeast. I flip across and happen to see probably more Giants games than I would like. Maybe not a super strong number 2 receiver, but could be a good number 3 receiver, making $6 million annually, 44 receptions, 665 yards, and 4 touchdowns, his average. Now, listen, none of those players are blowing you away, and, we all like Jauan Jennings' energy. He's a homegrown talent, all well and good, but you still have to put or match the productivity to the price. And we're just going through this exercise to see if it actually does. Other receivers, I think they might have only signed 1-year deals. DJ Chark, formerly of the Jaguars for a while, signed a $3 million deal with the Chargers. Odell, $3 million deal with Miami. And okay, he's, in his early 30s, a little bit older. Same with Tyler Boyd, early 30s, former Bengal, signed a $2.4 million deal with the Titans. And Zay Jones, who's had a couple good seasons with the Jaguars, signed a $2.25 million deal with the Arizona Cardinals. All 4 of those players, Chark, Odell, Tyler Boyd, and Zay Jones, all have had better careers. And when you break it down, seasons by average seasons better than Jauan Jennings. And all are being paid less than half of what he is going to make. Plus, it's a 1-year deal. A DJ Chark 1-year deal. They could probably get Juju Smith-Schuster on a 1-year deal if they wanted to for half of what Jauan Jennings is getting, plus whatever is going to be guaranteed in 2025. Listen, I'm glad he's back. Kyle Shanahan has wanted a big slot since they tried out Jaylen Hurd, that draftee out of Baylor who had 2 touchdowns in a preseason game against the Cowboys. And every Niner fan content creator was losing their shit. Next big thing. Oh, he's going to be awesome. It's never just one good game. No, it's never that. It's like, oh, you got hyperbole and he's awesome and this and that. And we're going to get into some of that with content creator absurdity at the end of the 49er section. Winds up blowing out his knee and just really was never heard from again. Had some shoulder issues as well. Injuries just derailed his career. So the body type that Shanahan was looking for and Hurd, he wound up getting in Jennings. I'm just wondering again, is the productivity and everything that he brings to the table, the attitude, the energy, the receptions, the third and Jauan, the blocking, is it worth what he's going to get paid? Just an open-ended question. But that leads into Brandon Aiyuk's contract update. And here's the update. There's no update. There's nothing imminent, but that's because contracts happen during the summer with San Francisco. We're going to go over that again in the content creator moron takes section in a few minutes. But is the strategy really working out for San Francisco? Waiting until the summertime. Price tags go up. Other people get signed. The player, the 49er player, doesn't come to camp in great shape. Chance of getting injured. Doesn't have a good season. And this is a Super Bowl type season for San Francisco where you want your literal number 1 wide receiver to absolutely get off on the right foot. Now, it's May 30th. I'm recording this. He can sign tomorrow, sometime in June. If he signs before training camp starts, I think that would be a win. But what's the benefit of waiting if you're the 49ers? I assume you could say, oh, we're going to play hardball. We're not going to sign you until after this year. We control your rights for 2 more years. This year, $14 million 5th-year option. We can tag you twice. That second tag, the cost goes up quite a bit once you tag someone 2 years in a row. But at what cost? You know, Aiyuk may be so unhappy that maybe he decides to sit for a game or two, or, you know, again, doesn't come to training camp healthy, and it sets the offense back somewhat, even though they have a ton of stars on offense. What is it really getting you, San Francisco, when at the end of the day, you're going to be giving him about $28 million a year? You're going to. I feel like we all know it. Even if his agent's asking for more, I think it's going to net out to about $28 million in real money, not this phony $31 million average, but the last year's bullshit. So when you actually do, you know, the math on a 3-year deal instead of a 4-year deal with that phony back-end money, it winds up being $28 million a year instead of $31. That's what Aiyuk's going to get paid. Just get it done. Now, if Aiyuk and his representation wants to wait because they wanted to see, would Amon St. Brown get a contract? And he did. Devonta Smith got a contract. Most recently today, Jaylen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins got a contract. We're going to be talking about that to see if, okay, well, that's what they're making. And of course, the next player up usually makes more. The only reason a contract has not gotten done is because Aiyuk and his representation doesn't want it to get done until they have more data points. From San Francisco's standpoint, getting more data points doesn't help them because the bar keeps creeping up. And one of the signings that happened, I guess, was at beginning of this week or end of last week, was Amon St. Brown of the Lions. 4 years, $120, 34.7 guaranteed at signing, $77 million in total guarantees. It's not a $30 million a year annual average value. It's really 28, given what that last year numerically is, and will get, you know, reworked. It's not going to matter. So it's a 3-year deal worth basically 28 per year. Now, if you want to look at the stats between Amon St. Brown and Brandon Aiyuk, the last 2 years, Aiyuk's been in the league for 4 years. Every year he has gotten better. The targets, the receptions, the yards have all increased from his rookie year through last year. St. Brown has been in the league only for 3 years. So, all right, let's just look at the last 2. Last 2 years, Amon St. Brown is averaging 155 targets, 112.5 receptions, 1,338 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns, which equates to 11.8 yards per catch. Aiyuk's last 2 years, 110 targets on average, 76.5 receptions per year, 1,178 receiving yards, 7.5 touchdowns, with a 15.4 yards per catch average. So let's break it down. The targets, 45 more targets for Amon St. Brown. About 36 more receptions for St. Brown. About 160 more receiving yards. Touchdowns are about even. Aiyuk does have a yards per carry, 3.6 yards per catch, higher than Amon St. Brown's. Now, people could look at this 2 ways, right? One, the Aiyuk way is, well, if he had as many targets as St. Brown, and if they threw as much as the Lions did, you know, and they moved him around as much because Amon St. Brown plays the slot quite a bit, then Aiyuk's numbers would be different, could be higher. Sure. Amon St. Brown could look at it and say, okay, listen, I can move around more. So that means they do move me around more. So I am more versatile. I am more important to the passing game. Plus, we don't have a viable number 2 receiver like the Niners have in Deebo Samuel. They're hoping Jamison Williams takes a step forward. They do have TJ Hawkinson at tight end like the Niners have Kittle. They have a Jahmyr Gibbs at running back like the Niners have a McCaffrey, and Gibbs was a rookie last year. So you can envision him getting more involved in the receiving game, but they're asking Amon St. Brown to do more as a receiver because they don't have a Deebo or, I don't want to say Jauan Jennings, because again, you're averaging 26 receptions a year. And Detroit, as much as we want to say it's a passing offense, they have the best offensive line in the league, if not a top 2 or top 3, and they are committed to the run. And the run opens up the pass, much like it does for San Francisco. Amon St. Brown, you can argue, is more valuable than Aiyuk is, or you can argue Brandon Aiyuk would have better numbers than St. Brown if he was in Detroit, or the Niners used him the same way. If you're an agent you're going to take one view, and if you're the Niners, you're going to take another. Not that anyone's going to be mudslinging or anything. So to me, that's a wash. Now, Jaylen Waddle's contract, signed today and announced, I think is the better comp in a way. 3 years, $84.75 million, $76 million guaranteed, so $1 million less guaranteed than Amon-Ra St. Brown. This averages to 28.25 per year, which again, that's not the real amount. It's probably going to be around 25. When you look at that 28.25 average, that average annual value, if you don't dig into it, means Jaylen Waddle is paid like a top 5 wide receiver. He should not be paid like a top 5 wide receiver. We looked at last 2-year averages for Amon-Ra and Aiyuk. Let's look at Jaylen Waddle. 110 targets, 73.5 receptions per year, 1,185 yards, 6 touchdowns, and a 16.1 yard per catch average. When you compare that to Aiyuk, targets are the same. Aiyuk has 3 more receptions per year. Waddle has 7 more receiving yards per year. And Aiyuk averaging 1.5 more touchdowns per season. But Jaylen Waddle has a 0.7 higher yards per catch average. Now that's doing it on, obviously, a fast-paced throwing team. I mean, even that's a misnomer because with the number of running backs they have between Mostert and Achane and Jeff Wilson, they drafted a dual threat running back out of Tennessee. They don't play 50-50 ball in terms of run and pass, but it is a track meet, and they do put it up quite a bit, and they have a number 1 receiver in Tyreek Hill. So Jaylen Waddle's numbers are actually coming in as number 2 receiver numbers. And again, you could kind of flip that on either side saying, well, Waddle's a number 2 and he's putting up those numbers. I'm a number 1, but we have more targets. And again, the team, the agent can take whatever stance they want, but Jaylen Waddle is eerily similar to Brandon Aiyuk the last 2 seasons. That if Aiyuk had a mathematical $28.25 million a year average, which again, that 3rd or 4th year being just phony money on the back end, and it being about, 25-ish million of actual money, that could work. Now, what do you think his agent's going to look at? They're going to look at Amon-Ra St. Brown's. They're going to look at A.J. Brown's. They're not going to look at Jaylen Waddle or Devontae Smith or Nico Collins got an extension. It's I don't want to say not in the ballpark because I think he's making like $23 or $24 million a year. But so there are more data points in for the Niners and for Aiyuk's representation. Let's see what they do. But I'm going to pose this question now to folks out there. And how good someone isn't really representative of how much they should get paid. It's if you're up for a contract, and if you've even only had 1 good year, like Nico Collins, you'll get paid handsomely. But who are the receivers you would take over Brandon Aiyuk? A.J. Brown, making $32 million annually. Again, this is the taking phony money into account. Tyreek Hill, $30 million. Devontae Adams, I would say for this year and next, yes, he's obviously in his early 30s, but performing at a very high level, $28 million a year. Then we have some receivers that will be getting paid that you would take over Aiyuk. Jamar Chase looking for a contract. Justin Jefferson looking for a contract. CeeDee Lamb looking for a contract. So those are 6 receivers off the top that I think are better than Brandon Aiyuk. Forget fit and all that. So, Aiyuk's a great fit for Kyle. Any of these receivers would be a great fit for Kyle and would outperform, I think, Brandon Aiyuk in the 49ers offense. Who are the maybes that you can maybe flip a coin on, depending on who you're talking to? I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's a maybe, getting $30 million annually. Cooper Kupp, he stays healthy. He's a maybe, $26.7 million annually. DK Metcalf, I may like him more than other folks do, and quite often he gets outplayed or outshined by Tyler Lockett. But in this offense with that body type, could he put up Aiyuk-like numbers or better? Maybe. Terry McLaurin on Washington, I mean, he's been a subject of such bad quarterback play for a while. Metcalf's at $24 million annually, McLaurin $22.7. And Stephon Diggs, early 30s, bit of a diva, got traded from Buffalo to Houston, $22.5 million. So now let's go. So those are your maybes. That's another 5. So we're in 11 players in Aiyuk's, that you want to argue Aiyuk about. Or you have the top 6 that you're not going to argue, and then you have 5 that you could argue about. Then you have like this cost per age benefit with some of these players. Michael Pittman on the Colts, $23.3 million annually. DJ Moore of the Bears, $20.6 million annually. Christian Kirk of the Jaguars, $18 million. Garrett Wilson of the Jets, $5.1 million. And Chris Olave of the Saints, $4.8 million. Those last 2, you have to wait to see what their contract extension is going to be. But, a Michael Pittman, let's say the legit average is $28 million for Brandon Aiyuk. Is he $5 million a year better than Michael Pittman? Is he $8 million a year better than DJ Moore? Is he $10 million a year better than Christian Kirk? Open-ended questions, right? I'm not going to answer them, but just things to think about. It's not going to matter. Is he $6 million a year better than Terry McLaurin? I don't think so. Is he $6 million a year better than Stephon Diggs? Probably not for the next year or 2, assuming everybody stays healthy. So then you had 6 that are better, 5 that are maybes. We're talking about 5 cost youth type of players. And then you have, the others, like a nod to the show Lost. Jaylen Waddle, we just talked about, $28.25 million a year. Devonta Smith, $25 million a year. Nico Collins of the Texans, $24 million a year. Calvin Ridley, $23 million a year. T. Higgins on the franchise tag, $21.8. Amari Cooper, $20. Chris Godwin, $20. And these, again, are just things to consider. Like, is Brandon Aiyuk $5 million a year better than Calvin Ridley? $7 million a year better than T. Higgins? $8 million a year better than Chris Godwin? You want to separate out like, he's been in Kyle's system for so long and he has a rapport with Purdy. If all those things are even and you just look at the talent of the receiver and you're going to be paying $6, $7, $8 million a year more, is it worth it? Is Aiyuk worth it, that disparity in pay for comparable production? My open-ended answer to all of you is I don't know, but just wanted to share something to think about. So let's move on from individual players to the team itself. The Niners got some love from Pro Football Focus as PFF ranked the top rosters in the NFL. San Francisco was ranked number 1, the biggest strength obviously being the offensive playmakers everywhere, receiver, tight end, running back. But the biggest weakness, pass protection. Their overall team grade was a 57.2. That ranked 24th in the NFL. And on display during the Super Bowl as Brock Purdy was pressured on basically half of his dropbacks. The X factor for this upcoming season, Talanoa Hufanga. When he was on the field through Week 11, the Niners led the league in team defensive grade through PFF. From Week 12 on, after his injury, they dropped to 14. Now that sucks to see because I'm of the belief that Hufanga's not coming back after this year. That the Niners are going to have to make some decisions and trim some salary and not add on salary in terms of certain players as, extensions. Now that might not mean everybody, because when you sign someone to an extension, that first year or 2 are super low cap hits. So between a Hufanga, a Charvarius Ward, a Greenlaw, let's just say an Aaron Banks on offense, even though I don't believe that they would re-sign a guard for really all that much. Maybe they don't all go. Maybe they do re-sign 1 because they do, or 2, just to be cognizant of keeping as many, forget about talking about it as core players, talented, all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber players together, not so much Aaron Banks, but it doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition, right? You could sign 1 if they think Talanoa Hufanga rebounded that nicely from the knee and is worth it, great. But they also drafted a backup and a possible replacement. Same with Greenlaw, right? Same with Charvarius Ward and Renardo Green. So I don't think it was totally coincidence that the team defense just dropped off that much with Hufanga not being on the field. Could be, the teams that they played as well. But Hufanga does make an impact, and we'll see what that impact is this season coming off of the ACL. PFF's rookie to watch was guard Dominic Puny. He had a 90.4 pass blocking grade last season at Kansas, all at left tackle. He, I think, is going to be able to challenge for the right guard spot between John Feliciano and Spencer Burford. If nothing else, worst case scenario, he has solid depth at both guard spots and both tackle spots. He has experience playing all four positions, and Chris Forrester, the offensive line coach, says, I'm really probably not going to give him any snaps at center, but could he be our fourth tackle and backup guard if he doesn't, guards, plural, if he doesn't win a starting position? That's absolutely on the table. And Pro Football Focus's over-under for wins was 11.5 for San Francisco, and they are expecting 12 wins, which is what I am as well. Difficult games throughout the season. Week 1 at home against the Jets. Rams, even though they seem to own them, that could be a split possibility. Seattle, they're at Miami, at Green Bay, at Buffalo. They have the Chiefs at home. They have the Cowboys at home. But I do think the Niners end up with 12 wins and, again, winning the NFC West. Now, the top 10 rosters, just so you guys are aware, let's go San Francisco, Kansas City, Philadelphia, the Jets, Ravens, Lions, Texans, Bengals, Cowboys, and Bills. Nothing really huge to take away from that other than the Super Bowl participants are the top 2 teams, and the Eagles were in it 2 years ago. They're right there as well. The Jets, it all hinges on Aaron Rodgers, really much like any team here. Starting quarterback gets hurt. You saw what happened when Joe Burrow got hurt in Cincinnati. Baltimore, when Lamar Jackson got hurt and he had a couple backups that had to come in. Those are your top 10 rosters. 6 are in the AFC, 4 in the NFC. And if you're wondering about the NFC West, the Rams had the 14th ranked roster, Seahawks 17th, and the Cardinals 28th. But the love doesn't stop there. CBS Sports named San Francisco's running back group as tops in the NFL. And this year it should consist of McCaffrey, Eli Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerendo, the rookie out of Louisville, and Kyle Juszczyk at fullback. Practice squad candidates, rookie Cody Schrader out of Missouri, and Patrick Taylor, formerly of the Green Bay Packers. This group, this tier that CBS Sports ranked were called thoroughbreds. And along with the 49ers were Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Green Bay. So Baltimore bringing in Derrick Henry. We'll see how much juice he has left in the tank. Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell, who is recovering from an ACL tear. They also drafted rookie Rasheen Ali out of Marshall, someone that I liked if the Niners were going to wait, until the 5th or 6th round to draft a running back. Instead, obviously, they went with Isaac Guerendo. Philadelphia has obviously Barkley, Kenneth Gainwell, and Will Shipley, a rookie out of Clemson. And the Packers, Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon, and Marshawn Lloyd, a rookie out of USC, are the thoroughbred groups. And they're really led by the number one, McCaffrey, Henry, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, interestingly enough, in his career, has not caught a receiving touchdown. May or may not strike you as odd. I just thought that was interesting. Wanted to share. I think the bigger question, now you have other teams that are in, say the tier below or 2 tiers below. I think the question that you can ask, which is a fair one, and I think a good point of arguments, does San Francisco have the best 1-2 punch, running back punch in the league in McCaffrey and Mitchell? And I think I could right off the bat say no, because they have a 1 punch. It's McCaffrey. Mitchell, if he gets 3 carries a game, he should consider himself lucky. So I think the Niners are very top heavy with the best running back in the league in McCaffrey and good depth in Mitchell, Mason, and we'll see what Guerendo is. But let's just, if he's the number 4 receiver, then totally running back, then totally cool. But if he proves himself and he becomes number 3, or he's not going to supplant Eli Mitchell unless there's an injury. Top heavy with McCaffrey, but good depth behind them. But teams that might have a better 1-2 punch. Look at Detroit. between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, Gibbs was a rookie last year. Montgomery, I believe, was his first year with the Lions. A very good offensive line. That's a solid 1-2 punch. Miami with Mostert and Achane. You could even throw, Jeff Wilson in there if somebody gets hurt. Still keeps a good 1-2 punch. The Steelers, even though they've been challenged offensively, getting rid of Matt Canada, I think is going to open some things up for him. But between Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, the Saints with Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams, and even the Falcons' young backfield, Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. You have a bit of a thunder and lightning type of situation there. So, yeah, between the talent and the depth, I would obviously put San Francisco in that first tier. And even, the players behind, Henry in Baltimore or Barkley in Philly or behind Josh Jacobs in Green Bay, I don't think are as good depth-wise as what San Francisco sports in Mitchell, Mason, and Guerrero. And if any, if Cody Schrader or Patrick Taylor stick on the practice squad, depth, good depth, but might not be the best 1-2 punch in the league. Again, I'll leave that as an open-ended food for thought. And let's conclude the Niners section with a couple content creator morons who just had, I haven't done my Twitter twats or Twidiots section in a while. And believe me, there is a lot that I could add. I'm trying to be, I don't want to say nice, but just trying to find more uplifting things to talk about. Since this is, really all trying to be informative and objective, but a lot of it is opinion-based too, right? I just gave opinions on what I think about the Niners 1-2 punch and 4 running backs that they're going to have on their roster. But one of the things that I loathe about, I don't say I loathe about social media, because it's content creators who just need content to put out. When a reputable source like an Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, people from NFL Network, ESPN, Michael Silver, actual journalists, Diana Rossini, Matt Mayoko, who's I think one of, if not the best 49er beat reporters, puts out something, breaks news, whatever, and then someone else uses their story as their own story for content. And here's the example. Chase Senior, and I believe Chat Sports or something like that. And I don't know if I follow him or not, but he posts some pretty good and decent stuff from time to time. Had a post that this was what the headline of the post was, or the copy. New update. San Francisco confident in signing Brandon Aiyuk. From ESPN reporter. Nothing imminent, but deals get done in the summertime. That was the shortened version of it, because I'm not going to read the whole friggin' thing. How is it a new update if nothing's imminent, nothing has been imminent for months, for years we know that the 49ers extend players in the summertime, and it's something that someone else said you just glommed onto. It is not a new update from you. It is something that someone else posted. Folks that are on Niner Twitter or sports fans, read ESPN, CBS Sports, SI.com, The Athletic, any paywall places. We're informed. We know what's going on. We don't need a wannabe, trying to be big time, important, self-important content creator to post updates on things that legitimate journalists are actually posting. I find that to be really ridiculous. And a lot of content creators out there, not just for the Niners, but for other sports as well. Anytime someone's released, they'll post on their feed, or someone signed or released. Yeah, we know. You are not the source of information. You are getting it from someone else. They're just doing it to keep creating content. And one of the reasons why this podcast is during the off season once a week and during the regular season twice a week is because there's not enough going on for me to talk about or want to talk about. And I don't post voluntary stuff on social media other than posting something about the podcast. Like I'll do it a couple times a week, different aspects of the podcast, to maybe generate interest or some discussion. And I don't post enough that people are really proactively conversing with me, and that's okay. If anything, I'll respond to what other people are posting. If something's interesting or something I don't agree with or something's flat out wrong and I have to like stat correct somebody or just, make, like fun comments about, to be part of a discussion. But I'm not on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, any of these things so much where like these people, that's their lives. And if they're getting paid a livable wage and salary for it, God bless them. But I know a lot of these people aren't, but just feel like self-important on it. But we don't need you to regurgitate stuff that other people are saying. And yes, did I just regurgitate Jauan Jennings' contract and Jaylen Waddles and Amon St. Brown? But I'm giving explanation. I'm giving thoughts. I'm giving opinions on how these players compare. Top ranked rosters. I know I'm kind of sharing that in the top running back groups, but there's thoughts going on. With Twitter, there's often no thought going on ever regarding anything, sports, politics, anything at all. But that's just one of those things where I just, it's part of the game, but absolutely ridiculous. You're not breaking news. You're not boots on the ground. You don't have a media credential. You're doing this for fun like the rest of us. You're not important. Because I know I'm not important. And an actual, I don't know if journalist or radio host who doesn't have a radio show anymore, but now is doing stuff on YouTube and Twitter, whatever. Larry Krueger, a Bay Area radio media personality, had this gem that he shared on YouTube, insinuating that undrafted rookie free agent quarterback Tanner Mordecai out of Wisconsin will be the number 2 quarterback for the 49ers behind Brock Purdy. And here was his quote. If Josh Dobbs thinks, oh yeah, I'm the number 2 quarterback and Brandon Allen's the number 3, no, that's not the way it's going down. Yeah, Larry Krueger, that's absolutely the way it's going down. Josh Dobbs was given $2.5, $3 million and almost all of it guaranteed to be the backup. Could there be some competition from Brandon Allen since he's been in the system for a year? Yes. And that's why training camp is there. You want to, as Jim Harbaugh used to say, iron sharpens iron. Tanner Mordecai is not making the roster. He might not even make the practice squad because I've said in my 53-man roster prediction, since this year, a practice squad quarterback can be elevated every week as the emergency number 3 quarterback on game days. The Niners very well may only carry 2 quarterbacks on their roster. If that's the case, it will be Purdy and Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs, the player who went from the Browns to the Cardinals to the Vikings in the same season and had varying degrees of success, quickly picking up the offensive system. Yet Tanner Mordecai from Wisconsin, a team that throws the ball less than the 49ers do, probably marginally better than Iowa in the Big Ten. That player is going to unseat either Brandon Allen or Josh Dobbs. Come on. Nonsense, hyperbole, someone that's saying stuff just to be sensational in a bad way for engagement, for clicks. Hell, I'm talking about him. I wouldn't recommend following him. There isn't really great content that he comes out with or anything that you're like, oh, that was an interesting thought or slant on something. For someone that has covered the Niners for as long as he has, he's a casual. Very casual takes, dumbed down takes. And this one might have been the cherry on top. So as we're, OTA is kind of ending for May. You're not going to pick up again until June when they're mandatory. Maybe I'll resurrect the Twitter twats, Twidiots section because there's no shortage of it. I just don't want to come across as a curmudgeon or someone who thinks they're above anyone else. That's not the case at all. I just have a hard time with stupidity, with morons, I'm a copywriter by trade. I'm a pharmaceutical writer. I'm a creative director, which is my actual title. Whenever I write anything, it has to be well-researched. It has to be something that the internal regulatory team for our pharma companies and the FDA would approve. So I guess I'm a little bit more sensitive to posting or speaking about nonsense and bullshit just to drum up engagement. But, that's the name of the game. God bless them. Wishing nobody any ill will. But I am oppositional, defiant to stupid people, to morons, and to people who don't know what they're talking about, even though they try to make it look like they do. So that concludes the 49ers section for this week. Stick around. I'm going to be talking Battlestar Galactica reboot rewatch on the Sci-Fi Channel and the unfortunate pleasure of watching Madame Web. Stay right here.
It's plus time.
So one of my favorite all-time shows, Battlestar Galactica, is back on Amazon Prime. And it's a reboot of the 1978 television series of the same name. If you guys are going to watch it, I'll just let you know it starts out as a 3-hour miniseries. And I think it says Battlestar Galactica 04, the miniseries. And then from there, there's 4 seasons that started in 2005. And it's sci-fi / fantasy. And what the story is about is humanity living on 12 planets, which they called colonies, out there in the cosmos. And in time, they developed robots to help them with everyday tasks. And those robots are called Cylons. At some point, the Cylons wound up rebelling. There was a war. Humanity won and drove the Cylons away. Cylons wound up getting on spaceships and leaving the colonies, leaving humanity to just live in peace without any, robot help or anything like that. What winds up happening is they return years later in a coordinated attack and just obliterate the 12 planets. And the twist of it now is some of the robot Cylons look human. And it's discussed that there are 12 models of human-looking Cylons, and there's numerous copies of each model. And throughout the first 3 seasons, you become aware of, the first 6 or 7 models, who they are, what they look like, what their motivations are, etc. And the last 5 models are revealed in the final season. As the series kind of progresses from that 3-hour miniseries, about 50,000 human beings survive. And they wind up fleeing their home planets. And, there's a civilian fleet of ships. And then there is the warship, which is called the Battlestar Galactica, that is protecting them. And they are, for the majority of the series, on the run from Cylons. The Cylons are trying to absolutely obliterate humanity completely. Not even having 50,000 human beings left, satisfies them. And even though it's about, right off the bat, you're thinking, well, this is science fiction. I might not, like, science-y, fantasy stuff. It greatly involves religion as well. And their gods, the humans' gods, are essentially named after the prominent Greek gods, between Zeus, Athena, etc. So they're praying to many gods, whereas you come to learn in the first season, the Cylons believe that there is one god. So you have a race of robots, whether metallic or human-looking, that believe in a god, while their makers, human beings, are believing in this pantheon of gods. There's a lot of characters, and I think they all get satisfying screen time and character arcs. I think in season 1, they introduce about 10 main characters. And the subsequent seasons probably introduce another 6, let's say, core characters to the show. And what the show, obviously it's outer space, and there's space battles and war and gun battles and human beings being hunted down by killer robots, if you want to call it that, androids, human looking robots as well. So there is that action element to it. It's still a human drama, and I think the characters are played extremely well by their actors and actresses. But the series eventually blurs the line between what it means to be human and a Cylon. You know, the human beings call even the human Cylons like, oh, you're just a toaster. You're just a robot. It's all wiring. You don't have feelings, etc. But these human versions of Cylons do, and the series explores like, what's that difference? Like, why are Cylons not human? They were made in human beings' image. They have feelings. Yeah, they can, process things. They have organs. They bleed. They can be killed. They can also be resurrected. That's why there's so many copies of them. Because if a Cylon is within range of what they call a resurrection ship and you kill them, their consciousness downloads into, another body, another copy of that human Cylon person. But, humans did MRIs and scans, and they can't find any discernible difference between a human being and a Cylon. So as you peel back the characters and their relationships and the seasons, and as things go on, especially as it pertains to religion, themes of like racism or questioning who you are, or someone that was your friend is now a Cylon. Do you have to hate them automatically, even if that person didn't know they were a Cylon and were quote unquote activated at some point, living their whole life thinking that they were human? And when this came out, 04, 05, you're still getting, a couple of years past 9/11, and, there are some terrorism elements of this, whether it's the Cylons trying to kill humans or humans trying to kill Cylons. Obviously, it's a war, right? There's going to be some guerrilla tactics and terrorism, in a war. But I think what's even most important, or more important now, is, seeing how divided the country is, or has been, historically, but let's say the past, 7-8 years, regarding race, regarding transgender folks and gender fluidity. This idea of, a Cylon coming to grips with who they are, thinking that they were a human being the whole time, but now they realize they're a Cylon and a race of beings that basically perform genocide. People coping with that. And you could see folks making the leap to maybe someone coming out as gay or going through gender affirmation surgery, gender fluidity. And certainly like even the race element might not be as pronounced as these other things, but people coming to terms with who they are, with people who they thought they knew, thought they were one thing, human, wound up being something else, Cylon. But does that matter? Does that change the relationship in their mind? This person that maybe they've known for years or decades is now something else. Interesting themes that I think are just as relevant now as they were 20 plus years ago, when looked through a different lens, where our society is now versus where we were early to mid 2000. Like I said before, it's one of the best shows that I've ever watched. It's number 42 on Rolling Stone's top 100 shows of all time. If you go on Rotten Tomatoes, each season has gotten a 90 plus by both critics and audience. And if some people are poo-pooing like, oh, I don't like Star Wars, I don't like Star Trek, I don't like outer space stuff, I'm not going to like it. If you like human drama stuff that is well acted, that there are high stakes and humanity being obliterated, there aren't stakes that are much higher than that. This is a show that I think is worth giving a watch. And just because, I mentioned, there's outer space battles and spaceships, this is not an event. This is not an effects-driven show by any means. You're talking 2005, 6, 7, Sci-Fi Channel didn't have a huge budget, which is one of the reasons why it ended after 4 seasons. But I think also the showrunners wrapped up the show in a very strong way over 4 seasons. But it's a human drama framed in a science fiction universe or setting, much like if people out there like The Walking Dead. That's human drama framed with zombies and some sort of disease apocalypse, and people are trying to survive. So I wouldn't be quick to dismiss it because, one, it's 20 years old and it doesn't look that good. The effects aren't top notch. Again, it's Sci-Fi Channel. They didn't have a lot of money to put behind it, but they still hold up for the time. But it's such a small part of, minutes-wise, each show, because it's about the people. It's about their survival. It's about the human drama and the relationships that they're going through. That makes it so, to me, enthralling. You know, and much like everything we got 20 years ago, they were 20, the last 3 seasons were 20 episodes apiece. Season 1, coming off the miniseries, was I think only 11 or 12. But remember, back then we were getting 20 episodes like clockwork every year. You know, one season might have ended in 2006, and the next season began later in 2006. How about that? You weren't even getting it every year. You were getting new seasons in the same calendar year. Because it was low budget, because it wasn't effects driven, because they cared more about the people and the situations and the acting and the story. Not to say that House of the Dragon and Last of Us and other shows out there don't have fantastic stories. They do. But you're getting 8 episodes every 2+ calendar years. And we're paying more for it because we're paying for these streaming stations, right? You know, Sci-Fi was and still is just part of like basically basic cable. And one of the cool things it does, and this was actually introduced in the 1978 series, it substitutes the F-bomb for the word frack. So in the series, they curse quite a bit, but their word frack is not a curse to us, so they're allowed to say it, which, granted, now that's something 36 years ago, 46 years ago, excuse me, Jesus, was introduced in the 1978 TV program. Smart. Not that it needs cursing or any show needs the illusion of cursing, but I haven't seen many shows since that I could even think of that invented their own curse words just to be able to use them to make the world feel more gritty and lived in and tense and angst. I highly, anybody that's listening, I highly recommend Battlestar Galactica. I'm not sure how much longer it's going to be on Amazon Prime, but in my top 3 shows, top 3 dramas of all time, easily. And now let's make the smooth transition to Madame Web on Netflix. Wound up watching it this past weekend because I watched the last episode of Battlestar Galactica, had nothing to do, and I needed an absolute fantasy palate cleanser. And that's probably the nicest thing I could say about Madame Web. Made $100 million worldwide on an $80 million budget, so it lost well over $100 million. Dakota Johnson's the lead. She plays Cassie Webb, and she winds up being born in the Amazon. Her mother was out there searching for spiders, is born in the Amazon, comes back to the U.S., and it picks up, 30 years later. She's an EMT. She's able to get glimpses of the future. And in the first hour-ish, she sees that 3 teenagers, among them Sydney Sweeney and Isabella Merced, on a train, on a subway, are going to be killed by someone. So she gets them out of the subway, protects them from a character who, his name is Ezekiel Sims, who winds up being the villain of the movie. And he's basically dressed up like a Spider-Man-ish character. The closest resemblance I can give is Spider-Man 2099, if anybody knows that character or wants to look him up on their phone, or so the latest Spider-Verse movie. He essentially was the bad guy. He looked like that. Now, Dakota Johnson is awful in this. I guess she's acting. It just feels like someone handed her lines to say before the scene, and she just delivers them. She fired, I believe, her agent after the premiere. She should have fired her agent for handing her the script. She was just terrible in it. There is no good acting in this movie at all. Now, it's a Marvel movie. You're not supposed to, or Sony Marvel, you're not supposed to get good acting, but when the lead is just like she's mailing it in, that was something that jumped out immediately within like the first 15 minutes. The other thing is, I'm sure people have seen the commercials for this. In the commercials, they show the three supporting teen females or teen characters as Spider-Women. That occurs, these actresses are in these Spider-Women variant costumes for maybe 2 minutes total in the movie. It happens in the first half hour when the villain Ezekiel Sims has a dream that he sees the future and that these three Spider-Woman characters kill him. So he is very wealthy, has a lot of resources, is hunting them down in the present and wants to kill them before they can turn into superheroes and kill him in the future. Great. And these females wearing the Spider-Man costumes happens at the end of the movie when obviously Cassandra Webb and these three females defeat Ezekiel, winds up killing him, and Cassie Webb winds up seeing their futures and she sees them becoming great superheroes. But again, 2 minutes of screen time in total. In between, you have Dakota Johnson trying to protect these three teens from Ezekiel, finding them and killing them until they have their big standoff, the last 15 minutes of the movie. Now, the character of Ezekiel Sims, it's not a bad character in this movie, but he was introduced in the Amazing Spider-Man run in the early 2000s, written by J. Michael Straczynski, who was responsible for Babylon 5, and Rising Stars was a really good independent comic series. Midnight Nation, really good 12 issue run, which I may do a review on in the near future. And he was an interesting character in the comic books, like the movie, has Spider-Man-like powers, can climb walls, has the proportionate strength of a spider, etc. He comes to warn Peter Parker that something is hunting him, and this creature is killing spider individuals who have animal-like powers or totems. They have an animal-like totem that they gained power from. In Spider-Man's universe, Spider-Man gains strength from a spider. Spider-Man battles this character, I believe his name was Morlun, like a vampire-ish type character that wants to just kill and drain these animal entity powers from each of its victims. Peter is actually killed, is reborn in a cocoon, and winds up defeating Morlun. Now, in this run, Ezekiel, the character that winds him, who's an older man, probably in the comic books, maybe in his mid-50s, and in this show, in this movie, probably the same, but his hair isn't as gray as it was in the comic book. One of the only interesting things that happens in this movie is that a young Uncle Ben is in the movie, winds up being Dakota Johnson's EMT partner, and Peter Parker's mother is in it, and she's pregnant. They never say, unless I missed it because I was bored and looking at my phone at times, they never say Peter's name, and that's probably because Marvel has rights to Peter Parker as part of their Marvel universe. But she's pregnant. She eventually does give birth. You never see the baby. I don't think you ever, get the name. And I think they do say Ben Parker. I think they were allowed to say the last name, but just not for Peter because of the rights that Marvel has. Now, this is the second movie in an unholy trilogy of Sony trying to create a Spider-Verse without Spider-Man, which, the conversation that had to have happened at Sony Films headquarters about making these movies, and they knew that they were going to take a bath. They knew that they were going to lose money, but based on the contract that they have with Marvel, they need to create a movie every couple of years that takes place in the Spider-Man universe, or they completely lose the rights to these ancillary characters like Madame Web, like Morbius, the vampire. The movie came out in 2022, made $167 million worldwide, lost over $20 million, like Venom and Carnage. Essentially, could use anybody. You could use, I guess they could use Dr. Octopus and the Vulture and others that, that they want to use. But does the universe really exist without Spider-Man? No. And the third movie in this unholy trilogy, Kraven the Hunter, comes out December 13th of this year, was moved from August for whatever reason. I guess they're trying to spread out their losses. and that it's going to be R-rated. That's going to bomb as well. It remains to be seen what Marvel and Sony work out in terms of, Peter Parker. Is Tom Holland going to come back? Are they going to reintroduce anybody else that's played Spider-Man before, or a new Spider-Man? The Marvel Cinematic Universe, that's really up in the air outside of Captain America, Brave New World, or whatever the name of that Captain America movie that's supposed to be coming out at the end of the year. Don't really have any concrete plans on what they want to do with the Spider-Man character, Tom Holland, or Peter Parker. Sony is floundering. I guess it's better to make money and make movies and lose money than not make movies at all. Perhaps. Just the idea of retaining the rights, whether it's for DVDs or toys or anything ancillary that they could spin out of these films. But I can't imagine Morbius or Madame Web having a huge merchandising component. But then again, what do I know? I'm just someone that tries to have some common sense. And a lot of us out there looking at the Sony Spider-Man cinematic universe going, what the hell? But that concludes the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening routine. We will be back with another podcast next week. Day to be determined, somewhere between Monday and Thursday. Just depends on, as I said earlier, the amount of news, what's interesting to talk about in the 49er world and elsewhere. I believe there will be there will be plus content in the next podcast as well. Topics to be determined. But again, thank you for listening. Whatever you're doing out there as we encroach into summer. For a lot of us in the Northeast, Memorial Day weekend marks the beginning of summer, but I know on the calendar it doesn't happen officially until June. But whatever you are doing, outside, inside, I was going to say otherwise, but I don't know if there's really any other option to outside or inside. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe. We will talk soon. Take care.